Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the Derate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it. Today, in yet another of our ProHuman Foundation Advisors series, I have the distinct privilege of speaking with someone who's not only a thought leader, but also a seasoned expert in understanding the complex dynamics of fragile states, societies, and communities. Seth D. Kaplan is the author of Fragile Neighborhoods, Repairing American Society One Zip Code at a Time. His work focuses on an issue that's been at the forefront in my mind for quite some time: the fragility of American society, not in terms of political collapse, but in terms of the erosion of social cohesion and interpersonal connections. Seth is a professional lecturer at Johns Hopkins University's prestigious SAIS program, a senior advisor at the Institute for Integrated Transitions, and a visiting fellow at the Mercatus Center's program on Pluralism and Civil Exchange. Beyond academia, he's consulted for organizations like the World Bank and the U.S. State Department, tackling challenges in fragile communities worldwide. In our conversation today, we'll explore what makes communities thrive or falter, and why local action and community engagement are vital to restoring our social fabric. We'll also delve into how technology and cultural narratives play a role in shaping or fracturing those connections. If you've ever felt that society is growing more polarized, more disconnected, and less respectful, you'll find this conversation enlightening and maybe even empowering. So let's dive in with my friend Seth Kaplan and see what actionable insights we can gain to build a better, more connected future, one neighborhood at a time. Here we go. Seth Kaplan, thank you for joining me here on the Derate the Hate podcast. I'm so grateful that you're taking the time.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Seth, when I found out you were part of our board of advisors at the ProHuman Foundation, and so people understand, this is part of a series that I'm doing. I'm part of the board of advisors at the ProHuman Foundation, and that organization has brought together this incredible group of advisors. And I'm one of them, but this group of incredible people, differing different backgrounds, different things that we all do, but we all have this common mission of seeking to depolarize and bring people together and just show the world that there is these better ways to engage. And Seth Kaplan, being part of that board of advisors, I really wanted to bring you in and introduce you to the DTH listeners. And I want our conversation to start, Seth, with this is something that I guess I didn't even know about until I started reading up on you and the things that you've done. And you are one of the leading experts, or considered a leading expert on fragile states, societies, and communities. And just for the DTH listeners, what is it to be considered a fragile state or a fragile neighborhood?
Well, I think people probably throw the term around a lot, and so there's multiple meanings. But for me, and people specifically, fragile states, which is actually a field, and if you go to the World Bank or international organizations, There will be people that are experts on fragile states. And what I mean by this term is, and I think the same would be societies, communities, it's basically a place that's politically or socially unstable. It's a place with low social cohesion, with institutions that don't help people solve their disagreements. So just as an example, think of Somalia, think of Nigeria, think of Syria, think of Libya. These are countries that if they're ever in the news, it's because there's no government, or there's a war, or there's some great human rights violation. And but really, at the heart of the matter is that they don't have they're very divided, and they don't have institutions. And when you have neither the cohesion in society or the institutions, you're basically very conflict prone, and you're likely to have war, or you're likely to have repression. And so therefore, they are what we might call structurally fragile. If I looked at a community in the United States, and I work on what we might call fragile neighborhoods. In that case, I wouldn't use exactly the same definition, but it's the idea is similar, because let's suppose you have a place with very weak relationships between people, very few institutions, very little cooperation to make the place better. If you have the chance to leave, you definitely leave, like often is the case in fragile states. There's no government for that fragile neighborhood. There's no, you're not going to have a war like we have in these countries. But you have some of the same dynamics and the same outcomes. People don't want to invest. People want to leave. There's little cooperation, and therefore fragile state, fragile neighborhood. It's very parallel in my opinion. That's why I use that term.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, and that's, I think it's important, especially, in this environment that we're in today, and this episode, it'll be interesting to see, but this episode will come out after the 2024 presidential election. But I know one of the questions that you've been asked quite often, Seth, is, is the U.S. fragile? And you say that the U.S. is fragile, but not as a state. It's American society that is in trouble, and I believe that's something that you talk about quite a bit in your book, Fragile Neighborhoods, Repairing America One Zip Code at a Time, which I really like. I talk about on the DTH podcast, Bettering the World One Attitude at a Time. I think they run in parallels quite a bit, the two concepts. But talk to me about that, Seth, because you say the U.S. is fragile, but not as a state. And I think that has to do with the fact that it's probably not as bad as some or quite a few people out there would have you believe. But you do say that American society is in trouble. So kind of expand on that for me, would you?
Well, if you have been to many parts of the world, and I've been to about 75 countries, and you compare the United States to what we might call a fragile state, we have great companies. We have a constitution that has worked for, about 230, depends how you want to define the start, but it's 235 years since George Washington took office. We even ran elections during the Civil War. We ran elections in World War II. We ran elections. We haven't missed an election. It doesn't mean they're always pretty. And this is a country with a lot of flaws, from slavery to racism to corruption to everything under the sun to some extent. I mean, it's really nothing like the places that I typically work in. So it's really hard to think with the Constitution, with the companies, with the technology, with the abundance of nonprofits and philanthropists and civil society. We are nothing like a fragile state. Right. And yet, when you look at the interpersonal relationships, and I think this is really what your podcast is about, we have an enormous decline in 2 generations in terms of how we spend time with each other, or whether we spend time with each other. what we do with each other. And so when I look at any country, this would be in Africa, the Middle East, anything that I work on, or the United States, when people ask me about the United States, the single biggest question that I'm always asking is, what is happening with the relationships? What is happening with the social dynamics? So when I started thinking about America, because so many people asked me, I was asking, well, we have all these problems, yet we did not have these problems 2 generations ago. So the big question has to be, what has changed with our relationships? And on a certain national level, a lot of things actually, we have a lot more stronger, more dynamic institutions, whether it's companies, nonprofits, philanthropists. Those are all actually getting more dynamic, larger, arguably more successful. And yet underneath it, you have all these social ills, polarization being one. But think of the trajectory for suicides. Think of the trajectory for drug overdose deaths. Think of the trajectory for trust. Think of the trajectory about mental health and depression. And so you can go on and on. All these things are relational at some level, not 100%, but partly relational. We don't have suicide if we have lots of relationships and we feel positive about our lives, we feel positive about our society. So there's a lot of things going on at the micro level, what we might call it the interpersonal level, with relationships that looks bad. And I think if you think about how our lives existed 2 generations ago in our neighborhoods, in our communities versus now, it's so obvious how much of a decline there has been. And so when I think about the problem is there. Our problem is not, the outcome we may see might be national because that makes the news and that's what gets our attention. But actually underneath it, we have enormous social decay. And that's what I mean by a fragile society.
I think you're spot on, Seth. This is, when I think about what I see in the world today in our interpersonal relationships, or the lack, the institutional distrust that we hear so many people talking about today, or the fact that people just don't interact now the way that they used to, I go right to that same question that you're talking about. What has changed? And it did not take long to change, but one of the things that I always go back to in my mind, and I know Jonathan Haidt has talked about it with the age of the internet and the onset, of everybody having this little computer in their hands, and what that has done to kids in schools. I know that's something that he's talked about quite a bit. But what I really want to get into is the ugliness that comes along with the loneliness and the depression and the increase in suicides and the fact that people just don't feel connected anymore in so many ways in real life. To me, I think it has a lot to do with this faux relationships that people have online instead of true interpersonal relationships with people in real life, like we used to have with our neighbors and community get-togethers and civic events and stuff like that. But get into that for me a little bit, would you, Seth? Because I think that is one of the big things that I would like to see change as a result of this, the work that I do with this podcast, or the work that I do with Braver Angels, or the work that I do with the ProHuman Foundation. I think getting people to really engage again with each other is so important, and I'd like to get your take on that.
Well, first I want to compliment you, because your day job, from what I know, has very little to do with any of these topics. But nevertheless, you woke up one day or one morning and you said, well, I can do something about it. And then you went out and clearly have been on a mission, and you've got yourself involved with lots of activities. And this podcast is only part of the picture. And I don't see the whole picture, but it just shows that everybody can stand up and make a difference. They have to just think about where what scope do they have, and where might their energy be best leveraged. Not everyone's going to open a podcast, but there might be something they can do in their neighborhood or in their community or a nearby place. And so I want to just compliment you and say that's an example of what everybody should do. I mean, that's why I write the book. That's why I'm here. That's why I also go around and talk a lot, and I don't ask for money or anything in return, because I just think we want to do the best we can to address these problems. So thank you for that. But in terms of what you say, I'll say there's two levels to think about this problem. One is in terms of, if we want to have a society in which we appreciate one another, we need to practice that. Mm-hmm. And when we have a lack of interpersonal, in-person relationships in which we know our neighbors or know people who live near to us, and we're involved in some activity in which we have to collaborate, talk to each other, compromise, stuff like that. It's not just I'm at the dog run and I'm talking to you, or I'm going for a walk and I'm saying, hi, how are you doing? 5 minutes and it's gone. Who knows when you'll see that person again? I mean, that's a start. That's useful. But the more we practice relationships on a personal level, the more we develop civility, the more we develop appreciation for difference. And I think so on one level, I believe the decline in the local, the decline in interpersonal, and I think the phones are the latest things to contribute to that. But I do believe there's plenty of data. It's been going on for 60 years. I mean, I think it started with the car, and then it was picked up by the television, and then you get technology after technology that basically atomized and isolated ourselves. And there's a lot of things we could have done differently, but technology was always going to put pressure. That's one whole level. A second level, I think, is because of a loss of these institutions and these local opportunities to contribute and do things, I think that makes us feel more alienated at society. We're not only more isolated, we're also more angry, alienated. We feel that we have a lack of agency. We feel that, you stood up and did something, and that's wonderful. But I think a lot of us look around and say, what can I do? All these issues are too big. Society or our economy or whatever it is, things are being done to me. What can I do differently? There's nothing around me that looks like what I can do. And we're sort of being made to think that all that matters is politics. All that matters is national campaigns over, abortion or guns or whatever the fight is. It's all national. When actually, if we thought that the local mattered, and we thought that we actually could step out our door, meet a few people, maybe join some, could be a church, could be a nonprofit, could be a civic association, whatever it is, could be organize a block party or do something. If we thought that actually the local mattered and we could step out, find someone to mentor or whatever it is, if we think like that, then actually we all have agency. We all could play a role. We all can be important. And I think our society has discouraged that or made us think that that wasn't valuable. And I think this creates this alienation that feeds so much into some of the bigger issues.
I think you make a hugely important point there, Seth, in that so many people today, because of the national news, cable news, 24-hour news cycle, and everything that's happening in the world being dropped right in everybody's lap at any given moment throughout the day, and sometimes all day, every day, with this constant news feed, whether it be social media or cable news or whatever, people start to lose their ability to compartmentalize what really affects them and what they're made to believe affects them, and they start to. Just to give a goofy example, and I don't know how goofy it is, but it's something that I know happens. Being somebody that lives in rural America, there are issues that really don't affect people where I live on a daily basis, but it's things that they continue to talk about and make part of their daily lives, even though that it's not really part of their daily lives, and they start to tune out what's right in their own back pocket, right in their own backyard. And one of the examples that really stands out for me is I had a conversation a while back with a phenomenal author and journalist, Bonnie Christian. She wrote a book called Untrustworthy, and she talks about I don't know if it was a friend of hers or an acquaintance of an acquaintance or what it was, but I'm trying to remember now. But she talks about how they had this dream, and they were going to buy a duplex, and they were going to rent out this duplex, and they were going to do this thing. But then, because of all this catastrophism in the news and the 24-hour news cycle of doom and gloom and everything else, they said, I'm not going to be in this. I'm not going to tie myself down to a place within in a metro area where it's going to be chaos and everybody fighting for food and fighting for our lives. So they took their life savings and bought a camper, and then and just went out and decided that they were going to like stay away from society now. That isolationism, that whole thing, this doom and gloom thing that keeps on happening, and people buying into the constant fear, outrage, and grievance that we see in this 24 hours news cycle, or we see in this faux internet ecosystem. It's not real life for people, but people start to believe it's real life, and they actually change the way that they live their lives. Isn't that right, Seth?
Well, I think I just imagine that if you're planted in reality, or you're actually in what we might call embodied life. If you're in real life with other people, and you're doing a lot of that every day, then if you get online, it supplements, it supports, it helps. But if you begin to get inside that internet bubble, especially if you're on social media, or you're beginning to believe what people tell you that you have no relationship with, I think it's really easy. I mean, that's where polarization, that's where you rate the hate. That's where the hate comes from. That's where some crazy ideas come from. And that's why it's so important that we actually get out and do things with other people. That's why I think refocusing our attention on what's in front of us in the local is so important. It's sort of it's a way to safeguard ourselves. It's a way to strengthen our society. The less of that we have, the more susceptible we are to the downsides of technology. I think technology, here we are across the country doing this, what you and I are doing. Maybe 10 years ago we could do this, but not 20 years ago. And even even the technology we're using, it's actually much better than it was 3 or 4 years ago. And so technology is great. It does so much for us. But the more atomized our society is, the more alone we are in society, the more we get all the downsides from technology. And so I would just say, not only individually, I mean, we as a country should be messaged. It should be part of national policy. It should be things that our leaders emphasize over and over again. And that's just not national, local leaders. We need to set an example. We need ourselves to step up and go out and gather other people together and do something useful. There's hundreds of things you can do. Just think, I'm thinking the person in my community. I'm at 910 on my street. There's a woman at 903. Not a very noisy person. Maybe she's about late 50s or something like that. So you would never hear her talk, and yet here it is. I'm aware that she goes around and she knocks on the door of people who live alone, and she goes and she talks to them. I mean, she does this for quite a while, so I see her doing this. I'm aware that if there's a cleanup at the park, it's her name at the bottom of she organizes it. I'm aware if we're collecting clothes or volunteering for a nonprofit, she's the one doing the organizing. And so these are things that I see without much effort. Who knows what she does that I don't see? But the point is, and she gets no recognition and nobody knows what she does. And I happen to live in a very flourishing place, so I could name dozens of people who are exactly like her doing different things. Someone fundraising, somebody stepping up, helping people in need, somebody starts a charity, all this stuff. And it's all doable if you just think of your neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can do so much if you only think at the size of, let's say, 5,000 people. When you think about 330 million people, boy, that's intimidating. That's really hard to make an impact. So let's focus on where we can really make a difference, because we will be important and we will make people's lives better.
Oh, that's absolutely right. And that's why I talk so much about, beginning, bettering the world one attitude at a time. It starts with each of us as an individual. And when people start to see how our attitude changes, people within our sphere of influence, I mean, it is contagious. And what you talk about there, I love that example, Seth, because it made me think of a conversation I had with another friend of mine, David Brooks, and he talks about his Weavers organization, right? It was an organization called the Weavers, and that's the exact kind of things that he promotes with that, is finding people like the gal at 903 there, whose name is on the list every time there's something going on, or these people that really understand. There used to be that old cliche phrase, right? The think locally or think globally, act locally. I don't know what happened to that, but it is one of those things that is so important. That kind of thing is contagious, and people believe it. You're right. If people get so stuck on the big picture and say, well, I'm just one person, I can't affect the globe, or I'm just one person, I can't really do anything, or I live in this state, this state is all blue, I'm a red, why should I even waste my time getting involved because my voice is not going to be heard? That is one of the things, Seth, that really stands out for me in the work that I do, is how important it is to make people understand that you can be heard if you work at it and you put in the effort. There are ways to be heard, and so many people today just do not feel heard. And when people do not feel heard, they just don't engage, and they don't engage until they become.
They feel lack of agency. They feel lack of agency, ownership, and they feel. I use the word alienation, but they can just feel marginalized. They feel like they're being disrespected, and I fully understand that. I mean, one reason why I am in this work, and one reason why I've always had the strong emphasis on relationships, because when I grew up, I was bullied. I felt I had a good childhood until I got to 7th grade, switched 7th grade to a larger school for the whole, whatever the town I was in, brought together a bunch of different primary schools, and had a completely awful experience. So awful, I switched to a different school. These are all public schools the following year. And the whole point was, I understand this feeling because I feel it instinctively, because I had years of this experience as a child. And so when I went out, I don't think it was conscious or intentional. I just ended up with this as something that I focused on because I think it's because of this experience. So people definitely do not like feeling disrespected. But the point is, if you look in a different direction, if you look local, if you look for some place that you actually can play a role, don't expect 330 million Americans. Some of this national stuff is so far away and so distant. Mm-hmm. Choose the right scope. The right scope is local. Choose some organization where you actually can join, or something that you can do. And before you know it, you will find people who do respect you, do appreciate you, and do listen to you. That's for me. I think we need to focus on what is doable and focus what's close to home.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I try to promote in so much of what I do is don't pretend that all of these national things are in your backyard, because they're not. One of the things that I would like to see personally is people getting more involved, again, in their local civic organizations, whether it be the Lions Club or the Legion, or obviously if you're a veteran, the Legion or the VFW, and these different organizations are still doing great work in their communities, but they're not seeing the kind of participation that they used to see, but also in our local elections, in our local, people forget that there are a whole lot more names on that ballot than the two at the top of the two that are at the top of either side of the national ticket, right? And there is so much more that's going to happen that actually affects your life based on that down ballot. So people really need to not forget about how important that is. And going back to that thing, the alienation thing, if you want to be heard, that's a good place to start, right? Get involved with these local civic organizations. Get involved with your community organizations. Get involved with your neighbors. I mean, I think a lot of people, I don't know where I read it, but there is the percentage of people who actually know and talk and do things with their neighbors in this country now are at like an all-time low. And
it's about half of what it used to be.
Yeah, and we've got to get beyond that, and I think, I mean, I have great hope, because obviously I have great hope because I'm involved in organizations like the ProHuman Foundation and Braver Angels that are trying to bring people together, trying to bridge these divides. I think a big part of that, and I know we're getting close to the end of our time here, Seth, and this is one of the things that I want to kind of wrap up with. A big part of bridging those divides and bringing people back together is showing people that we can, whether it be politics or just standard our everyday needs, wants, desires as human beings, we can come together and find a way to work through contentious topics and work through things with people that we disagree with. Again, one of the things that I want to ask you, and that I've been asking in this series of conversations with the advisors from the ProHuman Foundation, what is it that you want to bring? What is it that you want to see from your skill set, from the work that you do, Seth Kaplan? And how are you going to bring that to the ProHuman Foundation, and what do you want to see out of that work?
Well, let me say a couple of things. First, I think you mentioned a point before I answer your question about some of our institutions are in decline locally. I would say is, if you want to do something locally and you don't like your options, there's a lot of stuff you can do, whether it's a block party or it's volunteering for something. I would just say don't be constrained by what you see in front of you. You yourself started this podcast and you made so the thing is you were an entrepreneur. So I would say we need to be open-minded about it. So let me just emphasize that. In terms of what ProHuman or other such organizations can do, I mean, the main emphasis currently is on changing the culture. And I think that's what you're doing and what Brave Angels is doing. We're trying to change the culture. And changing the culture can involve many different things. I mean, it's something to do with how we teach kids. It's something about, for me, restoring the social fabric. So we are spending a lot more time with local institutions. I think more broadly, it's switching from a national to a local focus. I think it's getting certain. I mean, I work on narratives, and so part of it is how do we amplify more constructive narratives instead of polarizing narratives. Mm-hmm. So I think if we broadly say our work here is to shape the culture, I think of my own work as shaping society. And so culture and society are related, but they're not quite the same thing. So I think ProHuman Foundation is focused on culture. I'm more focused on society. For me, society is the nature of these institutions, our relationships. The culture is more about the ideas. So there's complements there. In terms of what I can bring to the table is I'm creating frameworks. I'm specifically helping lots of local players think about how they can do a better job in their communities. I'm talking about people who can grow what I would call grow sideways. So we didn't need to grow up to be huge. It's a little like Brave Angels. We can be a platform, and then there's lots of local chapters. That's sort of what I mean by growing sideways. So I believe we need lots of these local institutions. There could be an alliance of them across many places. But the point is, in terms of my work is just very much thinking through how we might change government, how we might change philanthropy, how we might change nonprofit work, and so on and so forth. So I'm interested in all of that and happy to contribute any way I can to any of it.
So incredible, Seth Kaplan. The work that you're doing is beautiful. The book, obviously, Fragile Neighborhoods, Repairing America One Zip Code at a Time. I'm honored to be serving with you on the board of advisors there at the ProHuman Foundation. I look forward to many more conversations, and keep doing what you're doing, my friend. It's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And if anyone wants to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website. Feel free to reach out if I can be helpful in any way. Appreciate it so much. And derate the hate.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends. Share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.